These roads intersect, on each one I reflect. These lines write my story. These places change me, each one replacing. Like night into morning, I miss the open air, the going anywhere, riding with you, like we used to. Guess I'm better off alone, never know when I'll get home, but I know that home's where the heart is. Guess I'm better off this way, moving to better days, but I know that home's where the heart is. Home's where the heart is. The endless journey, I need not worry. I'll get where I'm going. I made it this far, beyond where you are, and I'll keep on growing. I miss the open air, the going anywhere.
Right, hello and welcome everybody. I'm very sorry. Unfortunately, our special guest is still having technical issues, but the show must go on. We've waited half an hour. I'm sorry for keeping you guys waiting. And this is gonna be what I have finally decided on the name, the Who's Hot and Who's Not European Edition. So today we will be getting joined by Connor, KD0, Cryans, but right now I do have Viet Sinister Smiley Maria with me. It's really nice to have him back.
Good day, everyone.
Yeah, unfortunately it's not evening this time,
Yeah.
but
My clock is a bit broken with late nights.
yeah, so we're going to be going basically over all of the roster changes that have happened in Europe over the last preseason, and we're going to be giving you guys a little bit of a rundown of who we think will be the top teams and who we think will not be the top teams this year. I'm going to move right along. I don't think we really have to waste too much time if I can just work out how my screen works. And basically, the first team on my list, we're going to be going from bottom to top, is, funnily enough, Vitality. Now, for me so far, when I look at the name and the people that are playing on Vitality, the only real name that really stands out to me at the moment is the fact that Cabochard has decided to stay true to his team and not leave. Cabochard's probably been one of the most dominant top laners. He is a bit hit and miss, I'm not gonna lie. But when I look at the other names right now, Jace Trolls, Mini Tropax, Jazooks, I know they all come from a team. I think they were at Rocket or something, but they have, I don't actually know which team they were last at, I cannot remember, but, or possibly it might have been Schalke or Giants. I think they were all at Giants. There we go, we've got
Giants,
all at
yeah.
Giants. They've all moved across, and I mean, they've got Gilius as a jungler, so for me this team literally just looks like it's been scrapped together at the last minute. And it does appear that our special guest has just arrived, so I'm just going to pull him in and quickly introduce him if you just give us one moment.
User was moved to your channel.
Awesome. So our special guest has finally arrived. I'd like to welcome Connor, KD0, Cryans. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, what's up?
As cool and casual as ever. Connor, I've just briefly spoken about what I rate as my number 10 team being Vitality. And we're going to move on to what Viet just quickly has to say about Vitality, and then we'll be moving on to your ideas and decisions on the team.
So I do agree with you on the point on Cabochard. I do remember way back when I used to play a lot of fantasy LCS. He used to got me a lot of points. So not too bad with in the top lane, getting the kills when necessary. But as you said, very hit and miss. Sometimes he doesn't do anything. Other times he really does do his job. I do remember Troll also not being too bad. He used to be in Giants as well. But otherwise, that team don't think Gabashard will only be the only consistent one as far as I can see there.
Awesome. Connor, you have any thoughts?
Well, with Vitality in specific,
Yes.
uh, well, for me, the biggest dark horse in Vitality has to be Mini True Packs. I don't know if you guys ever seen him play, but from watching him in the promotion tournament when he's still with Giants and they got promoted into LCS, that guy's definitely a top ADC. So if he has the right team around him, I think you'll be able to see how good he really is.
Yeah, look, I definitely do think that the one thing the team does have is the fact that those three Giants players have all come across together. So they will have at least a little bit of synergy so far. But I know Shannon also really hyped up Mini Packs in the last discussion I had with him. So it is interesting that Connor does also point him out. Unfortunately, I haven't actually seen him that much myself, but I just think like with Cabo Shard there, he seems to be, unless if Mini Tropax can step up, those two seem to be the only two for me because Gilius has taken so much slack in his career, and I really think it is justified. Like he's a complete hit and miss jungler. He often misses more than he hits, and I mean, how often do you ever see Gilius popping off on stream or anything along those lines? So I mean, I don't have much else to say about Vitality. I put them as my last team. Um, they could be a dark horse, but really for me, I don't see this team doing really well unless Cabochard manages to carry like through and through this team. And I really think there is a lot of emphasis in solo queue and carry jungler. I mean, carry top laners at the moment. But I think when the season starts, we're still going to see tanks coming through just because Ornn is still so powerful. Maokai will always still be powerful. So I'm not exactly sold on whether these hard carry junglers like Camille, GP, um, yeah, I don't know if they're really gonna stick around.
I actually interestingly enough, I put Vitality just above Giants from second to last because they got all the Giants players. So I do actually think they will do better than Giants because they have all Giants players.
Awesome. All right. I'm gonna move on to the next team on my list, which would be the aforementioned Giants. So Giants have now kept stuck with their top laner, who unfortunately I cannot find a photo of for some reason. They've decided to get rid of Gilius and pick up Joko. They've got Betsy moving into the mid lane, Steelback as AD carry, and Turgamus as their support. I don't know how you meant to say that name. I think I said it right. In all honesty, I don't think this roster is completely terrible. Um, I do think Betsy's a very like interesting mid laner. I don't think he's particularly weak, and I honestly think one of the most underrated players has once again found himself in kind of a bad team. And that being said, I think Steelback's actually a very underrated player. Um, I remember at one stage he was a very solid AD carry. He had really good stats. I still think he's a very solid AD carry. I just don't think he's a particularly good playmaker. And the only reason I put them above the Vitality squad at the moment is because I do have a lot of hope that Betsy can do a lot of work in the squad.
Yes, indeed. The For Ruin, I do see he was in Nerf and SK Gaming. I can remember him in SK Gaming back in 2016, so I can't really remember what he did there. But Steelback and Fnatic, I can remember was really great. Used to love watching him in the support back in those days. Can't remember what his support was, but they used to have a really good top bot lane and Fnatic. It could it have been Yellowstar back then or not yet? I don't know. I think it was in like 2015 or something. Betsy and mid lane, yeah, as you said, really good there. Targamas, haven't really seen him before, but I do think if they can maybe build around mid and bot lane and the jungler can communicate properly there, we should have. They can maybe beat the likes of Vitality there.
Yeah, definitely. Anything you'd like to add, Connor? Your breakdown of the team?
Well, for me, I don't think Giants is gonna do very well the season coming. I mean, Choco, whatever you say his name, if you look at his stats, he's pretty much been, in my opinion, the worst jungler throughout last season, or 2017 at least. But on the same token, I think Betsy is actually really good. When Rocket had their, their surprise post playoff run, I think Betsy was, in my opinion, the key player in Rocket for their success. And Steelback also, he has experience, so that goes nicely with them. But as Viat said, I don't really know this Artemis very well. I don't know what he can do, but I'm not going to judge him, until I actually see what he can do. And Ruin, sorry, he is quite a solid player, so we have to see what he can also do against the top teams.
Yeah, just as you said, to add to that, as I said, if they can have solid communication from the mid, jungle, and bot lane, but if you say that he's not a really good jungler, so that could be an issue getting that point off, which I think should be a solid point in their success if they do get any success.
I just don't think the meta suits Joker at all. I mean, he's predominantly an Olaf player, if I remember him correctly, and I don't think we're going to be seeing Olaf much this season, especially with the current Ruin changes. I do completely agree with Connor when Rocket went on that, I think it was six wins, 0 losses. It was on the back of on the back of Betsy. So I really think he might be able to bring enough to the team to kind of just put them above Vitality, but I don't see this team staying. I don't see them missing relegation unless they pull the magic rabbit out of the hat. Right. So next team we're going to be moving on to, for me, was the new H2K side, and I was a little bit shocked when I saw this side come out, when I saw the roster on this side, especially considering the fact that it's kind of like what we said about Clutch Gaming yesterday, where they kind of found out all the scraps. There aren't really any star players here. And I mean, they're opting in for picking up Sheriff. They lost Nuclear. No one really knows where Nuclear's gone. Reddit doesn't even seem to know. But Sheriff was at one stage, when everybody was at Worlds, the #1 ranked EU player. So he does have a lot of hype around him. He is incredibly young. So I'm hoping potentially he could bring something good into this team. I don't think Sprattle is particularly bad. He's a pretty kind of your basic support. Santorin, I found he really struggled in Challenger Series last year, so I don't really expect too much from him. I feel like after he left TSM, his career's kind of gone a little bit downhill. He never really managed to get back to where he was, even though a lot of people bash him when he was playing for TSM. I don't think he was particularly bad. And for me at the moment, I must say, I think Smitty J is probably going to be the anchor for this team. He is quite a consistent top laner, and he has been doing well in the past. So I think it's going to come down to how well this team actually meshes. They are a completely new side. There isn't a single player that's been brought back from the old H2K side. And I mean, that's always concerning, the fact that all of the H2K players decided to leave.
Yes. That is also something I noticed immediately when I looked at this team, is when I saw everyone left, and Febivin and Janko's, I think, being a core part of the all team, with Odawamne being fairly solid, not too bad in top. So I don't know, a lot of these mid laners, as you said, Santorin took a fair bit of a dive, and the rest I don't know too well, but I do think that maybe they'll take. The organization has always been known for not doing too bad, so maybe they will take a middle spot somewhere. Maybe they'll fight off for a 6th or 5th place, but we'll have to see if they can get this team to bring up the H2K name, as they've always been doing fairly well.
Yeah, well, with me personally, I would have probably ranked H2K last if I'd have made a list. I just don't really see any star players. I mean, Alex, you did say Smitty J, but I still don't feel like he is that promising. Maybe compared to his roster, he stands out, but in the league itself, I don't think he's anywhere near the top. I still do think Santorin has potential. He might have fallen off a bit since his TSM days, even though he was regarded as quite bad in TSM. But yeah, I still think Santorin can show us something that we haven't seen before. Although the one downside of that is Santorin is actually considered an import, even though he's a European player, because of the fact he's been in NA for the past few years. But yeah, I still think this HUK team won't be very good. I mean, Spratle's always been that support who gets relegated. Sheriff's an up and coming player, so I can't judge him yet. And I know KD0's always been stuck in the Challenger series, and I mean, maybe there's a reason why he's never really played in the RCS, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I definitely think that the biggest challenge for all of these players is the fact that Smitty J probably has your most, okay, barring Santorin, probably has your most experience in like top quality League of Legends, and I mean, he's still Smitty J. So like, it's not like they have any star players, and we've seen time and time again all these new teams that get like almost like positions bought in the LCS and they move in, like completely get destroyed, barring potentially, I think maybe it was Immortals, but Immortals did have like top tier players and had a lot of money put in, where these are all kind of average players. And I only really think like Sheriff, there's been a lot of hype about Sheriff. Like when Royalty went overseas this year, we actually ended up meeting Sheriff, and like everybody at the tournament was talking about this guy, and they actually ended up finishing second in the tournament. So I don't know how well he can actually carry a team, but I did know like he is a mechanical god. His CS differential has been incredibly good in the small little tournaments that he has played in. I know he used to play for Iskuba, so we're just or Isuba, sorry. We're just gonna have to see how it turns out. But I mean, it's a stepping stone for him, and the only reason I ended up putting H2K in 8th is because I have a lot of faith in the org as it is, and I do think they might be able to like kind of polish these guys up, because I don't think KD0 is a completely terrible mid laner. He did do really well for Schalke when he played for them last year, but I do think Fox played more games for them anyway. So we're just gonna have to see. I don't know if any of you wanna touch up anything else on H2K.
Well, I see one of his favorite champions is Israel. So if Israel keeps on staying in the meta as it is, I know he is getting nerfed. I think next patch on his Q. So maybe his early game will take a hit. His mid to late game is going to still stay the same. But so if Israel can stay in the meta, maybe it will actually favor Sheriff. And as you said, he is an upcoming player, so maybe they can work around that.
Yeah. Also, the last thing I'd say is that we haven't really pointed it out yet on the other teams, but HUK's coach, from what I know, he is, if I'm correct, I actually haven't done the research or anything, but I'm pretty sure that name looks very familiar. I think he has at least been at the organization, if not been their coach. So, I mean, if it is the same coach who's familiar with the organization alone, I mean, that's a bit more promising and positivity for them.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Veteran's been there for quite a while. So hopefully he can pull out some kind of magical thing with this team. But like I said, I'm not super impressed. Like I do understand what Viet's saying about the Ezreal play, but I don't expect to see Ezreal being played in much competitive at the moment, just because of how strong he actually is with Klepto. So I do know he's also he plays a lot of Caitlyn as well, which we're not actually seeing a lot of. So I'm not exactly sure. I mean, the kid is really good. He's really young, so I think he'll adjust. But I don't think there's really much else we really need to say about this team. So let's just hop on to the next team, and the next team is gonna be Splice for me. Splice have lost Wonder for Odo Womne in the top lane. I think Odo is actually potentially a little bit of an improvement in terms of overall skill compared to Wonder, but Odo does have a lot of like consistency problems. I also don't think he is the most reliable player in terms of like mental fortitude. I do think he kind of loses the plot a bit and does seem to kind of take it upon himself to try and one-man army carry his team. In the jungle role, we got Zerko. I don't know how to say his name. I've never been able to say his name, but Unicorns of Love's old jungler. I've always thought he was pretty good. Like, he's really solid. I think he's an upgrade from Trashy, to be absolutely honest. In the mid lane, we've got Niski. Niski also a really, really solid player. Not an entirely flashy player, but I do think Niski shouldn't ever be left out. I think he's like kind of like another Betsy. Like he's another player. EU have been known for having like really good mid laners. I think he's another one of them. He's not on like Perks' level and Caps' level, but I think he's just kind of behind that. But like in bot lane, Kobe and Kasing, I feel like Kasing's kind of like past his prime now as well. There's a lot of hype around him when he came out. He's a very, very vocal player. I know he's probably going to be shot calling for this team. And like Kobe, I haven't really seen much from Kobe last year. I feel like Milky X last year, or Mickey X last year, really, really did a lot of work in that bot lane, and I think he kind of put Kobe on the right kind of platform to kind of carry some of the games. But I really feel like Kobe just kind of being like that standard safe AD carry that doesn't really do much. He just farms and does damage where he needs to do damage.
Yeah, so when I'm also looking at this roster, Odoamne, he didn't do too bad in H2K when he was there. I think, as you said, sometimes he likes to go one man army into things and try to take things like almost into his own hands, and it always doesn't work out because it is a team game. So then Xerxes is also, I remember in Unicorns of Love, he also used to be like around this team. It seems like it could be good, but not sure if they can get there. Splice is always like a middle team. Sometimes they win a lot of games, sometimes they lose a lot of games. So I'm not sure, but Kasing has also been all around the show and so many teams. So he's also been, as you say, out of his prime. Not even sure. It says he was in last year. He was in Red Bulls, so don't even know that team. So not sure what to think of this team.
Well, for me, I kind of actually rate Splice as more of the top off. I feel that Odiomne always has been a solid top laner, and if he stands out to me for anything, he is really good at his jungler, like the way he synergizes with Jankos. And I'm pretty sure that him and Xerxes will be able to be a dominant duo on the top side of the map. And Niski, he's also an extremely young player, just like Xerxes. So they've got, they're young and they're still up and coming. But I think if they could reach, not necessarily their peak, but if they could grow, Xerxes and Niski, if they could grow a bit and make plays around the map, then I think this team could be extremely dangerous. Kobe, as Alex said, he's a safe ADC, but he is good. He really is good. And Kasing has been out of it for a while, but I'm pretty sure that he could be able to reach his peak again.
Yeah, I just feel like Kasing's almost become like an X special, like someone that was really good at one point, and now, like, hopefully now that he's come back to like kind of LCS now instead of playing in Challenger, maybe he'll step back up. But I mean, when I watched X Special, he was a god, and then he went down to Challenger, and then he came back, and then he wasn't the X Special we used to know, and now he's just forever stuck in Challenger. So, well, in Academy side now. Look, I do agree with Kiddo to a point. That's why I put this team a little bit higher up. I think this team might have a lot of teething problems, kind of a whole new roster except for one player. We're going to see a lot of that in Europe at the moment, so it's going to be quite hard to say. I do know they did lose their main coach, Motor Cannon. He's gone. So that's going to be a bit rough for them, I think. I'm pretty sure he left now. I don't think he left earlier. I'm not entirely sure. But they've picked up Peter Dunn as a coach now, so Peter Dunn is quite a good coach. So he might be able to kind of turn it around. But I just feel like, I remember last year specifically, Xerxes playing a lot of Ivan, and this meta, Ivan is definitely not going to be around. And like, I do think he's a really, really good jungler. So I have a lot of hope that this team will prove me wrong and end up being like the dark horse that finishes in maybe like the top 3. But I just think the other teams above them, barring 1 or 2, are a bit strong. for them. So we're just gonna have to see. Maybe Odo and Kasing are gonna be able to translate like their experience into the other players. And Niski's gonna be able to grow a little bit more in terms of macro play. But I do think that currently there's still gonna be a seventh side. I mean a seventh position team for me unless they really prove themselves. Sweet. Well, moving on. I have in my 6th place, I put Roccat. And the main reason when we look at Rockat's team have been like completely changed again. Not another player that's really come from anywhere else. They do also have 2 Korean imports in their team in Prophet and Blank. One of them coming from one of the SKT sides in Prophet. And Blank, I think Blank used to play for Jin Air, if I'm not entirely mistaken. I might be wrong on that, to be absolutely honest. But he was playing for PSG last season. He didn't really impress me too much last season. But I do think they have a couple really solid players. And they have got quite a lot of experience. The only biggest thing is most of their experience for me is lying in their 2 Korean players. So whether they have communication issues or not, that's going to be one of the biggest things. North Scaren for me is probably one of the biggest up-and-coming supports. Everybody's seen that that top 5 play of his where he flashes with Thresh and manages to catch the hook on someone just under the tower. I think North Scaren is a really, really decent support player. Top lane Prophet is kind of like solid when he decides to be. He was playing in Ninjas in Pajamas, one of the worst teams I think I've seen in LCS so far. There was a lot of hope and a lot of hype about it, but I mean, Prophet having to kind of like combo up with Shook for me. Shook was never really a good jungler in my opinion, except maybe when he first came out, so he kind of died. Now having to pair up with Memento. I think Memento is pretty solid when he doesn't kind of have his confidence issues. I do feel like he does get a bit rattled if enemy jungler plays quite aggressive into him. But he seems very determined to kind of improve. Has had a lot of improvement over the last couple years. And I don't really have too much else to say. It's kind of like a question mark for me. I don't think he's particularly bad, but I don't think he's particularly good. So hopefully North Scaren can kind of mold him into a better AD carry, or at least step up. But the one thing I will say about the teams this year is there aren't a lot of strong AD carries, and that was the one reason that I thought potentially maybe Sheriff has a chance this year. But other than the kind of like the top 3 teams, or top 4 teams, there aren't exactly that many really, really strong AD carries in Europe this year.
Yes, that's the 80 carry point is a very good one actually. So for me as well, I'm not very hyped around the bot lane on this. North Scaren, as you said, is very good, and EQ. So maybe you can get him into a in shape ADC. But Herjanen and Wadid was a big one for me. I think Herjanen is a really good ADC, and Wadid is also one of those people that prove themselves. So I think that was a very good a bot lane that they replaced. So they have a lot of big shoes to fill for Team Rocket. Blank, not sure what happened with Prophet though. I mean, he was an SKT, and then from there he was just dumped into Ninja and Pajamas, where he didn't really do any well. So don't know if he's going to bring it back this year. Gonna see if what's gonna happen there. Yeah, this team seems like it replaced good players, but maybe they can, as you said, because of the ADC, Hiku can bring that in. Don't know Prophet too well, so can't comment on that too much either.
Yeah, well, for me, Rocket is a very hit or miss team at this point. Prophet, I don't know if you guys ever heard the meme, but he was basically that player who saw enemy, kill enemy. You know, rumble, run at them. That's pretty much how he was known back in his SKT days. And unfortunately, Memento is almost the same. I think, if I'm correct, he is actually a Rengar one-trick, inverted commas, before he became pro. So, you know, they're a very hit or miss team that I could see become the next Unicorns of Love, where they just pull out this crazy stuff you've never seen before. EQ, personally, I think he's actually a really solid AD carry. He's just never been in the right environment to show it. And Norskiren, he's been in Challenger Series for a while, I think, and I guess he's gonna have to prove himself on the big stage now. And I feel like Blank has kind of hit his worst in his career. He's gone from Jin Air and slowly it was Jin Air, sorry, and just slowly, downgrading himself to where he is now.
Yeah, look,
Sorry.
the biggest thing for me is the fact that Prophet still managed, even though he was that kind of player, he still did manage to win a world championship. So surely, like, after a year of being in Europe and kind of now not, like, I mean, we all know with these Koreans, they really dedicate a lot of time to learning English when they move over. So I'm really, really hoping he can maybe transfer a little bit of that kind of world championship knowledge into the rest of his players. So this team does have a really good potential. I do completely agree with Connor that Blank in Korea used to be actually quite a decent mid laner. I would put him in like top 5, and he has very much steadily declined. But I mean, he was playing in PSG. I can't remember who he was playing with. I think he was playing with Pilot last year, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong. So there was kind of this steady decline in his play. So maybe this will be the year where he kind of wakes up, especially having kind of like someone like Prophet playing with him. But then again, the meme of Prophet kind of just being there, being that, see top laner, kill top laner. I think that's going to come down to whether Memento is going to be able to keep enough pressure in the top lane, especially if Connor does say, like, he's quite a good AD carry. I haven't heard too much from him, so maybe if this bot lane can hang on and Memento can kind of keep that top mid pressure, maybe this team will have a chance.
Not sure if this could bring a different dynamic to the team, but Prophet and Hikyu were ninjas and pajamas together. So I don't know if a top laner and ADC can bring some maybe shot calling to a team because they've been together, maybe they know each other. So that could be a different take there.
Yeah, well, all I can really say, just to end off with Rocket, is I feel like they're that team that if they get ahead, they will close out the game. With Prophet, the memes, see enemy, kill enemy. I mean, he is a carry player. He did play for SK Telecom. You can't deny it. He's a good player. And like I said, Memento, from what I know, he's also one of those carry junglers. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be playing a carry jungler sort of style in this Rocket lineup, but from solo queue at least, that's how he is. So I feel like if this team does get that early snowball, they will be quite difficult to, beat.
Yeah, awesome. I couldn't agree more with you, Connor. Alright, we're going to jump on to my now 5th place team in the middle of the table, which I've given to kind of a surprise team for me after looking through it, but I really think Schalke are going to be one of the better teams in the league, to be honest, this year. I find it very interesting, and one of the biggest things for me is the fact that I never really thought Vivisachi would leave Unicorns. I think he's a brilliant player. He's probably one of, if not the most consistent top lane player last year in Europe. So I find this move to Schalke like kind of sudden for me. So there must obviously be this reason. I've actually watched a lot of Pride Stalkers games. I think Pride Stalkers also an ex-Rengar main, funnily enough, but I think he's actually really, really good. He's also had kind of that curse where he's been playing in bad teams the whole time. The same for me could be said about Upset. I don't think Northscare and Upset really kind of combined too well, because I feel like Northscare was always kind of an aggressive player and Upset was kind of a more passive player. Now getting Vander in the mix there, I feel like Vander's really, really cleverly calculated. I've always thought he's actually quite a decent support. So I feel like those two will definitely kind of be catalysts for each other. And then my only question mark generally is Nuke Duck, and that's only because Nuke Duck's that player where sometimes you watch Nuke Duck and you're like, this guy is such a god, and then other days I watch him and I'm like, what is he doing? Like, playing Quinn like 3 months after it left the meta, like 4 patches after it left the meta, still like being so slow to pick up new champions and like stuck in his ways. I have always been a Nuke Duck fan since Lemon Dogs. I do think there's a lot of potential in him. I think he's a really good player. I can still remember that devastating game Nuke Duck played against Fnatic with GP, where they ended up getting that surprise win with Vitality over Fnatic. I also think like last year's Vitality side really swung with whether Nuke Duck and Cabo Shard showed up. So I do think he has a lot of potential. I just think he's very inconsistent. Like, he does put out really good farm numbers, but I just think his champ pool also, like, he's kind of like that really weird player that just like picks all the most random champions to play, and it takes him he's kind of almost like resistant to meta, and then once he adjusts to the meta, he refuses to move off what he's adjusted to. So I'm wondering if maybe the new coaching staff can maybe help him out here. I do know Crepo is the coach for Schalke this year, and I do think Crepo has a massive amount of game knowledge. He's been on the analyst desk many times, and I'm really hoping, especially just for this bot lane, because I do have quite a lot of high hopes for Upset and Vander, that Crepo might be able to kind of transfer a lot of his knowledge to them as well.
Yes, looking at this team, I think Pride Stalker will have to maybe see if he can put a lot of pressure on top, since Vizicachi does like to play some of those more damage-focused fighters most of the time. So if Pride Stalker can make sure he puts enough pressure on top for Vizicachi, I think that could be very successful for them. Vander and Upset, as you said as well, I think it works well, much better than it used to, because it's more the same style they play. So yeah, that and this team could actually be very good, but we'll have to see if Nuke Duck can pick up the meta as it goes on.
Well, for me, you guys are mentioning this whole Nuke Duck and, you know, playing his own meta almost sort of thing. And one thing I can tell you guys is that I've seen so many professionals talking about it, how Nuke Duck is that type of player who will not pick up the meta, but he'll rather build his own meta to counter the meta. So he's a very weird player, I could say. He's a player that I would personally want to be, you know, trying to build your own meta, but, you know, no one would really want you. So it's quite surprising that teams pick him up after he has this very weird sort of play style in his champions and all that. So I think there is a reason why these teams do pick him up. He is very talented. I know he's been playing since season 3. So yeah, I think Nuke Duck he's old, so I can't necessarily say he's a dark horse, but he is individually a really good player. Vizicachi, I don't even have to introduce him. We all know how good he is and all he's done for Unicorns of Love in the past. The only the only problem I have with Upset is that he's young and he's a bit toxic, I could say. I know pros have burnt him in the past because of his attitude problems, but, you know, maybe he's grown up and fixed it, almost like a Dardock from NA. So yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah, the one interesting thing for me that Connor brought up there was the fact that kind of Nuke Duck is like the anti-meta kind of guy. Like, he finds ways into the new meta. And the one thing that I do find really interesting is with the way they're setting up the patches now this season, where now you'll have a patch, instead of having like a fixing patch every 2 weeks, I think it is now, they're going to be doing a big patch and then a small patch, which kind of just hot fixes kind of like smaller problems, and then another big patch. So we're only really going to start seeing this like really big change in like the way the game is being played kind of once every 4 weeks. And the one really interesting point that I saw that they brought up on the dive was the fact that, like, if you leave a bunch of players to kind of work out something for long enough, they will eventually work out that there is a natural counter to what is kind of OP at the moment in that patch. Whereas if you don't give them enough time to do it, they'll just generally like kind of hop on to what is just strong instead of trying to find a counter for it. And I think Nuke Duck might really be a good catalyst in this team just in that respect, because he's going to have like 4 weeks between patches to kind of find out what the real good counters and anti-meta kind of champs are. So he might really actually be a key in this team, especially with the way they're kind of setting the games up. And also, like, I feel like Vitality always last year kind of came up with these like really like Cabo Shard playing Nasus and And like they came up with kind of these really weird ways to win games, and now having more time to do that, I feel like they're gonna be that. And like now having Versace, like they have these kind of players that play this really weird stuff, and I think that might really shake a lot of the top teams, and could potentially get a lot of like sneaky wins for them. Even though I mean they're still for me like a really decent looking team, and I do also agree with Connor that I think Upset might need to grow up a bit, but I think he's around enough experience this year, and he's like moved out of Challenger that like he needs to put his big boy pants on now and really prove that he belongs in LCS.
Yeah, so basically we're gonna have to see if the anti-meta can counter the meta. That'll be key.
Alright, now we're gonna start getting exciting with my number 4 place team on the list, and that's gonna be the new Unicorns of Love. Now I know there's gonna be like a lot of controversy about this because someone like White Knight coming in after playing for PSG is filling the shoes of Versace. Cold, formerly known as Trashy, is now filling Unicorns or Jungler's position. Xerxes. But we still have Exile and Semax, and now Totoro's come in from BBQ Oliver to come and fill in. So one of the biggest question marks for me, or two of the biggest question marks for me, is how is White Knight going to compare to the other top laners in Europe? Because there is quite a bunch of strong top laners. Odo, Cabochard. You still have Soaz, who a lot of people will mention as a strong top laner. He's not exactly my favorite. I still think Wonder's quite good. You've got Prophet. You've got all of these like really decent top laners. I mean, Alfari is also there. So I really think like EU is kind of stacked on top laners right now. So I'm really wondering if White Knight, like, you know, the meme of White Knight back in the old days being a god, like, is he going to be able to hold out? And then also, like, will Semax and Totoro be able to combine themselves together enough? Because, like, they're going to have language issues. Like, Totoro coming from Korea. I don't think he was a particularly bad support. I think most Korean players do actually, like, really lose a lot of form when they come down and play anywhere other than China or Korea for some reason, because I think there's, like, a different kind of workflow for how I think Koreans work like way harder when they're in Korea. When they get here, I feel like a lot of the players find like maybe solo queues a bit too easy for them or something like that, but I just find like they lose their edge. Like in Korea, everybody's always like, the solo queue players feel like you're playing team fives all the time, and now when they come to Europe, they lose that, and we saw it with a lot of people. GBM was the meme. He came down, he played for NRG, he stole some barons, and then he disappeared off the face of the planet. So many of these like top players have come in and disappeared. I think the only ones that I can really think of that did well were Huni, Rainover, Expect, and Trick. So like they've been the really good imports. So I don't really see this. I don't know if Totoro is really gonna impact the game that much, especially being a support. But I do think Exile is really good. I think he's a top notch mid laner. Semax is also very solid. Trashy for me is still a question mark, or Cold, whatever his name is now. I do think he's quite good, but I do know, like, I watched a lot of Yamoto Cannon's like talks with his team and a lot of those videos last year, and Trashy was quite a big problem at one point because he can get quite toxic, and he can get like very confided in himself in a game, and he stops talking to his team, so that's gonna be quite a big problem if he hasn't gotten over that. But I do think if this team kind of pull themselves together, they do have a really strong lineup. If the White Knight of old can kind of show up, if Trashy's fixed his problems and can kind of synergize with Exile, I really, the reason this team is put in fourth for me is because the organization has always been very strong. They always pick up these random players that no one's kind of heard of, and now this year they're picking up these two new kind of players that we have heard of, but like it feels like a big stretch for Unicorns to be picking up like Totoro and White Knight and Trashy. So they've obviously seen something, and I'm basically putting this on the shoulders of Semax and Exile, saying that they're going to carry this team to fourth place, and that the organization and the coaching staff are going to be there right behind them helping.
Yeah, it always feels like Unicorn is picking up these players and then kind of molding them into what they need for the team. So hopefully they can do this as well. As you said, the language barrier issue is going to be an issue in bot lane. I think Unicorn should have this covered, and all it should. I think they shouldn't have that, but they probably have a plan for all of this. So yeah, the top lane White Knight, big shoes to fill. But don't really know White Knight that well, so I can't comment too much on him. I think he does like to play a lot of carry centric champs. So Cold and White Knight is going to have to work together to see if they can get top lane into a carry position with maybe Exile. If bot lane is going to have issues with the language barrier, so they can have mid and top doing most of the work if bot lane is struggling.
Well, for me, White Knight has actually always been like the mechanical god of EU since I can remember, since about season 2. I know, or at least the inverted commas new ranking system with the divisions that's been released. White Knight has always been at the top. Even back in the days when I was still ELO, he was still at the top of the US server. So yeah, he's an experienced player in the sense of League of Legends itself. In professional scene, I don't think he's got too much experience, so that's maybe his one negative to him. But Cold, I think personally he's actually quite a good player. He does his job very well. He plays, I know he's like a very good Gragas player, and he does his job. He's not necessarily the mechanical player, but I think he's the type of jungler you would want. Exile for me is another version of Nukeduck in a way. Not in the sense that he doesn't play meta, but he also does have his picks that he goes with, such as Talon, and I know he loves his Kassadin as well. So that's also something to look at. The only problem I see in this team is their bot lane in Samax and Totoro. Not necessarily because they're bad, but they are both extremely defensive players from what I know. And I just think that an aggressive team such as Fnatic, for example, with Broxah in the jungle, I think they could really get punished if they just allow the enemy team to run over them.
Yeah, that is the one thing. I mean, in a team like BBQ where Totoro used to play, like I will admit, like he kind of never had the opportunity to be aggressive because his top mid and jungle were generally always doing something either really good or really stupid. I watched a lot of BBQ games and they never seem to like fail to give me great entertainment because they do the most weird stuff. So their bot lane was kind of left on an island last year. So I do agree, like I do think White Knight is still always up there. He's always going to be good. So I'm hoping that he's going to prove us wrong and prove that this team might be really, really good and might even be one of like the top teams in the country. But I do think this bot lane is going to struggle because if I look at the other bot lanes, I do think they shine way brighter than these two.
Yeah, they like, by the looks of things, they like all of them like very hard carry champions. So it almost feels like if this team is going to do good, they're going to do very good and crush people.
Yeah. Alright, now the next two teams I really struggle to find a big difference between. I think it's going to be really close between them. And there will only be one reason why I've decided between one or the other, but I'm going to move on. And the next team on the list is going to have to be Misfits for me. Even though Misfits have kept 3 core players, and I think these 3 core players were very good, barring maybe Maxlaw. I think Alfari is incredibly underrated. He proved at Worlds last year that he can stand up to a lot of the really good top laners in the world, and he did a very good job of it. He for me really shone last year. Like he stepped up majorly. He was a complete like nobody when he came in. Their team finished really high up. They did really well at Worlds. They almost beat SKT. I know it wasn't the best year for SKT, but these guys really did well. For me, I think Maxlaw has always been a bit of a question mark. I don't think he's an amazing jungler. I think he's pretty solid. Kind of like what Connor said about Trashy. Like he's a decent player. He needs to be where he needs to be. Hansama, I don't know how well he's going to do without Ignore. I still think like 10 out of 10 best Jhin in Europe. Like he was an amazing player. So hopefully he can kind of reproduce that, especially now that they've managed to pick up this duo from Splice. Because for me, Senkax has always been kind of in a bad team. I feel like last year Splice weren't terrible, but I feel like Senkax could always have been in a slightly better team. I think he's actually a very, very decent mid laner. He does have one or two people that I will admit seem to be his kryptonite. Like Senkax always seemed to fail when he played against Niski. So I mean, yeah, it was Niski. Niski and Betsy, funnily enough, are the two that he seems to really, really, really struggle against. I do distinctly remember Rocket camping him very, very badly. So I don't know how good his mental fortitude is, but I do think he is a very, very, very solid player. Especially like at the beginning of the year when Splice started, they were looking very, very wobbly, and Senkax for me was the one who kind of stood out above the crowd and stepped up. And Mickey X has also always just been like that really, really solid player. Like he's super confident, he knows what he wants, and I mean, I feel like he is a good replacement for Ignar. Like, I feel like Mickey X would be that guy. I mean, he plays like Gragas support. Like, he'll bring out what his team need. So I think this bot lane are going to be quite a strong bot lane. I don't know if they're going to really stand up to the bot lane coming through from Fnatic. And maybe they might struggle against some, but I have a lot of faith in this team. Like I said, Maxlaw for me I think this is going to be his season where he needs to step up. Like he's proven that him and Alfari can match up. Now if he can give Senkax kind of like the confidence that he needs, I really think this team has the potential to finish second. The only reason I put the question mark on this team is because my second place team just have the reputation that they have.
Yeah, as you said, Maxlaw not being the best, but I think Maxlaw and Alfari works really well together. Like in even at Worlds where Alfari was pressured in lane, Maxlaw's rotations were just on point, making sure that every time they wanted to try something at top, he just immediately shut them down, and he went and got his top laner ahead. So it will be good to see if Maxlaw and Senkax can like mingle as he and Power of Evil used to do. So I think that three people will be a big turning point for them. But as you said as well, Mixie I think will have to bring what Hansama needs as of Ignar, because Ignar left, and Ignar being a very big part of the bot lane there.
Yo, this Misfits lineup is actually really good from looking at it now. I'm really excited to see Senkax in this up and coming season based on what the meta is now. I mean, sure, the meta can change tomorrow, but I know Senkax is really, really good on he's more of like poking control mages like Zeroth and now the new Zoe, and I'm sure he'll this is his time to shine. Maxlaw, maybe he's not the the rush, the heavy playmaker, but one thing I can tell you guys is that he is the high of Europe when it comes to shot calling and leadership. I mean, if you guys ever watch his YouTube channels or even the VODs or point of views from Misfits, at least when they were playing at Worlds, he's the most vocal player in Europe, like hands down. And Alfari, he's a player that's always going to hold his own in lane. I've got no question about that. If you had to have a 1v1 tournament, I'm sure he would be able to beat everyone in Europe. Hansama, he's good, but my problem is that I don't think he's that ADC that will get himself rolling like Reckless would, for example. But bearing that, Mickey X is actually a solid player. Like we said about Kobe earlier, he's a super passive player. So it was a bit tough for Mickey X in lane, and he still managed to make Kobe look extremely good and get into that late game. So I'm sure this team will be extremely good.
Yeah, I don't think I have really much else to say either. Like everybody pretty much hit this team on the head for me. Like I said, I'm just gonna jump on to the next team unless anybody else has anything to say. Sweet. Okay, so now this team is basically only here instead of third on reputation, and that's gonna be G2 for me. And I think this lineup is incredibly interesting because I think they've obviously signed Perks for 3 years now, so he's not going to be going anywhere. I think it's the same thing with Reckless, or Reckles, however you want to say it. He's also been signed for 3 years by Fanatics. So these two teams, they're going to stay around, and I think G2 were very, very, very strong. I think they've won the last four like splits in a row. It's been uncontested. I think they've lost their star bot lane, but they've replaced it with another bot lane that are on the rise and are very, very good. I think Hyanon is incredibly, incredibly underrated. He's really, really, really like lived in Reckless and Sven's shadow, and I think that now that he's in a better team, he kind of really has the chance to really, really step up. What did as well, same thing, like definitely has the potential to step up and be the best support in Europe this year. Yankos in the jungle, known for being the first blood king, is incredibly, incredibly solid, is very, very, very determined. I mean, I've always really, really loved Yankos. I think he's an incredibly good player. And in the top lane Wonder, like, I think he's like the perfect way to round this off. Like, this G2 esports team could definitely easily get to the top of Europe. Like, I don't see a problem with him. Wonder, super solid player, one of the most solid for Splice. Does also have a tendency to have kind of these like really derpy moments, but majority of the time he is incredibly strong. And I mean, you can't really say anything wrong with Perks in the mid lane apart from that maybe sometimes his arrogance gets the better of him. He's an incredibly solid player. I think he is one of the most solid, if I'm not correct, and also has one of the highest KDAs in Europe. I think only one player has a higher KDA than him in terms of mid lane, and that is Caps. Overall, this team just look incredibly solid, and the reason I put them in second is because the organization, I think Ocelot puts a lot of time and effort into the players that he chooses, and I think they've really, really got it right this year. I think all of these players really, really complement each other, especially the mid jungle duo. I think they're going to be very, very, very strong together.
Yeah, G2 also being one of my second choice. They always been very solid. John and Wadid, as I said earlier, is one of my favorite EU duos. I think they do really well together. And the jungler and the mid laner as well. Janko is being very, very solid. Liking his Leesons and Elises. We'll have to see if Elise is going to be back in the meta this year. But yeah, G2 being very solid in my books as well.
Yeah, for me, this G2 team is definitely the team that's hyped me up the most. Perks and Yankos, they are both so arrogant, but they are both so good. I think together they will make a really good duo, and to be honest, the best duo. But Yarnan and what did, even in Rockets, they were known for holding their own and actually, sometimes beating bot lanes just purely 2v2 based. So I think this team, if they just play around the mid-top side of the map, because Wanda is also a very promising player, that they'll be extremely good, because Yarnan and what did are both extremely, extremely good players, and they got the synergy already. So if Perks and Yankos can synergize together, I think this team is going to be easy finalists.
Yeah, definitely. Like, my only question mark for this team is the fact that it's obviously like basically a whole new team barring Perks, but I mean, well, it is basically a whole new team barring Hyanon and Wadid playing together last year, so they might have some teething issues, but I mean, like I said, I honestly feel like the players are literally perfectly matched for each other. Like, you've got like Connor said, the two most arrogant people in Europe basically playing in the same team. You have Wanda, who is probably one of the most vocal top laners, as well as like one of the most like reserved in terms of attitude. Like, he can work with nothing. In Splice, he didn't get too much attention from Trashy last year. So, and yeah, bot lane is totally perfectly well rounded for this team, because they can just generally hold their own, if not beat the enemy bot lane that they're playing against.
I think the biggest part that's going to make a difference in this team, if they can gel together. If they can manage to gel together, I think they're going to be very strong.
Awesome. Now on to the last team, which obviously you can work out by process of elimination, which will be Fnatic. Look, I'm not gonna walk out and say that I'm the biggest fan of this roster. I do think they have four incredibly solid players. One question mark that everybody will hate me for saying. I'm not a major SOAS fan. I do think he's quite solid, but I have honestly felt for the last couple seasons that he still could have retired and someone better could have replaced him. But obviously he brings some element of experience to the team. Because he does lack a bit of mechanics, so he is obviously there for a reason. I don't know if Fnatic just like not letting go of players because they're like building up kind of the solid bond, but this Fnatic side, they showed up at Worlds when it really mattered, and they like powered through two tiebreakers, beating Gigabyte Marines and Immortals, who I honestly thought Immortals would thrash them. So also now picking up Helisan, getting rid of Jesus. I think Jesus was probably the weakest link in their team last year. I've never been a big fan of Jesus either, but I think Helisan is really good. I think he worked really, really well with Semex last year. I think he's a very, very good playmaking support, kind of like a Yellow Star, which is what Reckless really needs, because although Reckless is an incredibly good AD carry and also always top of the challenger list, he's not my favorite player in the world. I think last year he had some serious teething issues. Like, I remember at the beginning of the season, after I think the first 3 weeks, he had the lowest CS differential at 10. He had the lowest damage to gold share ratio. And I also think his team feed a lot into him to make him the superstar that he needs to be. I think SOAS doesn't take up a lot, Broxer doesn't take up a lot, Caps doesn't take up a lot of CS. I think it's normally shoveled into Reckless so that the Reckless can hard carry most of the games. And I mean, that's how Fnatic generally work. They let Reckless kind of just sit and farm it up on Tristana. Then he is that really good late game carry for them, but I do think his laning phase is a little bit weak, and I also think that's because he was playing with a really, really passive support. I mean, I've never thought anything of Jez's. When it comes to the mid lane, this is the man, the legend, Baby Faker. Yes, Caps does have some derpy moments, but I mean, like I said earlier, he has the highest KDA of any mid laner in Europe. He's sitting at a KDA of like 11.9 last season. I think he's an exceptional talent. He's super young. He's still improving. Broxer in the jungle. I think this meta, if it does end up being kind of this like carry jungler meta, will totally suit him. Also another jungler that's always good at being in the right place at the right time. Manages to like kind of steal a lot of barons and turn a lot of games for Fnatic a lot of the time. I think he's very, very, very solid. My biggest question mark has been SOAS. He's proven me wrong time and time again. Hopefully he proves me wrong again this season. But I do feel like he could be the only person that I would replace in this team with potentially someone like KD0, and we'd see a super team come out in Fnatic. But I really think sticking with the solid kind of core four, this team looks very, very strong. And I think if pushed, they do show up, and like they did at Worlds, and they really gave us a good performance at Worlds.
Yeah, so to add on to what you said there, actually they did keep Jesus in this. He's just the support substitute. So for picking up Hillisang in this place, maybe they're going to do a like kind of swap out thing with the two to see, because I think they play a bit of a different style support. So Hillisang has always been very, very solid in Unicorns of Love, but maybe they want to try different things with Reckless and bot lane, since they normally do build a team around Reckless doing most of the carry work. So maybe that could be a good strategy for them to try out different kinds of supporting or bot lane styles. But yeah, in other ways, mid and the team being so long together, everyone, they didn't really replace anyone, so the synergy is still there.
For me, the only problem is what I don't think a lot of people realize is, personally, I actually played against Broxer in solo queue a few times, and he is actually quite a toxic player in solo queue at least, and I'm just a bit worried that, in his rookie season he was a bit, calm and, not really, a bit shy, I could say, but I'm scared that now he's getting experience and becoming noticed, that he's gonna show this real person he is. Other than that, they have a lot of experience. So as Reckless and Hillisang have felt like they've been in the scene forever. Reckless, always my all-time favorite AD carry. Personally, I feel like he's the best. Maybe not in terms of lane or anything, but to actually carrying a game. Sang a great support. I think he's a support you always want to have. You can be that playmaking support. I mean, you can't tell me you haven't seen some of the Thresh plays he's made, but on the same token, you can put him on something like Lulu or Janna and he'll do a fantastic job. So as he is quite hit or miss, but I think his experience is the main reason why Fnatic would want to keep him. And yeah, I'm just also hoping that Caps can fix a bit of his arrogance. Very similar to Perks. So yeah, we'll have to see where that leads. And also a interesting fact is the new coach Dylan Falco, who also coached the Immortals lineup, he's a really solid coach.
Yeah, I'm definitely with Connor on this one. The biggest thing I worry about for this team with them now adding a, the only reason I say I would like to see SOAS replaced is because I do think like Reckless when he came out when he was young, he was fantastic when he played with Yellow Star. Like that Reckless I think has faded a bit. Maybe he's matured. Maybe he's just playing safer now because he's kind of grown a bit more. But I really want that kind of player to come back, and I think Caps kind of allowed him to be a bit more free this year because now they have a better kind of more talented player in the mid lane that's really like holding his own. But one of the biggest things for me was the fact that I really would love to see a top laner that can really carry this team and like help Reckless out and just take a little bit more pressure off of Reckless. Other than that, I do put this team in number one. I think they've proven this year that they can really compete. I do think this is probably the most competitive I've ever seen in Europe, especially with these top four teams. And yeah, I also agree with Connor. Reckless is probably one of the best supports in the world. I mean, 80 carries in the world at the moment. I think there's a lot of hype around him. I think I've only ever seen one 80 carry with more hype around him than Reckless, and that's Jackie Love, the new 80 carry for EDG. And I mean, there's been so much hype about Jackie Love that we just have to wait to see how he plays. But I'm really excited about this roster. Even though it's literally one player change, but I'm also very excited that they have picked up the Immortals coach because I really felt like Immortals with kind of like a very average-ish roster last year really stepped up and did very well. I do think the meta suited their players quite a lot, but I'm really hoping that Dylan can work like magic with his team because I do think Fnatic as an organization are a very solid organization and they do have a lot of potential. Awesome. So last but not least, what I thought was interesting to look at was just when I was doing a little bit of like a preview of all these players and putting them all on this list. I went and looked up some of the player rankings, and one of the most interesting things for me is the fact that now that Expect is gone, you'll notice that the top four players in this player ranking are all Fnatic players. And the site's normally pretty accurate. I did double check it with a couple other sites to see what the player rankings are, and this one I felt was probably the most accurate. And I found it very interesting to notice the fact that the top four players were all from Fnatic. Then moving down the list, those three really solid players from Misfits were there straight up in 6th, 8th and 9th, with Perks and Yankos also being very high up on this list in 7th and 10th. And then like just looking at, I mean, if you look at it, we're only missing one player from Misfits in this list, and I think that's their support. Because we do see Senkox sitting in 21st there. Niski is also ranked pretty high up for a mid laner here. I think there's only 2 or 3 other mid laners above him, and that's Caps, Perks, and Blank. This site does have put a lot of faith in Blank's ability to kind of carry. But also I feel like this site boosts Connor's kind of dark horse and Splice when I look at it, with Odo, Xerxes, and Niski all being pretty high up on this list. I don't know why this site's giving me Caps' average KDA of being 7.5, because on every single other site so far I found Caps's average KD was like 11.6. So I don't know if that's just a problem with the site, but just looking at it, like it looks like the kind of the Fnatic sides are all kind of the most solid in terms of win rates, like G2 as well, with Perks. But other than that, it looks like it's like a two-horse race between if Perks can kind of replicate that with his side that he now has, or if Fnatic are going to kind of stay more dominant. I really expect to see the Fnatic win rate to go up this year, especially considering the fact that they've really had a lot of time to prepare, and they've got a better coach in inverted commas, and they're very, very, very talented players. Anyway, all right, but to sum it up, then I don't know if, like I said, so basically when it came to my roundup, I had Vitality in 10th, Giants in 9th, H2K in 8th, Splice in 7th, Rocket in 6th, 5th was Shulker, 4th was Unicorns of Love, then 3rd I have to put Misfits at the moment, simply because G2 and 2nd are a really strong organization, and then 1st, unfortunately, not being a Fnatic fanboy, having to put Fnatic in 1st hurts, but I do see this Fnatic roster finishing 1st. But yeah, I just want to say thank you so very much to everybody for tuning in to the Who's Hot and Who's Not European edition. I'd really like to thank KD0 for joining us. Connor, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure having you around. I'm glad you managed to sort out your monitor issues so that we could have you. We are hopefully going to be doing one of these for the expected Premier League teams for the SA community, which might be a little bit interesting to do later in this next month or two, once people do decide to start registering and getting their teams online. And then I'd also just love to really give a shout out to Viat again for coming in. It's always a pleasure having Viat. He always brings a different outlook on everything to the stream. So yeah, thanks so much to you guys. And I'd just like to say good night or good afternoon to everybody watching.
Ha!
And then
you did it too.
yeah, and then if you guys want to see more of this videos like this, we're going to be trying to make them as many times as we can. I know Shannon Nyarfi Smith was really keen on kind of doing like a weekly review kind of show where we go over what happened in League of Legends in Europe. We're mostly probably going to focus on NA Europe and LCK because China is just like the worst time for us to all watch, or at least for the three kind of analyst people to watch. So yeah, but then we're going to definitely be doing the LCK Championship, I think, tomorrow evening. I'm not exactly sure what time. That all depends on when Shannon gets back, but I also don't know which guests are going to be. I think our special guest for the evening is going to be Taylor Rose, or Taylor Ellis Rose. He's someone that I found has an incredibly vast knowledge of Korean gameplay, as well as Shannon. So yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we hope to see you tomorrow evening.